So we added the server action and we're extracting the data. Now I want to store that data in the database. And of course, for that, I did already create that posts.js file, which was part of the starting project. Now in there, we have this store post function, which wants a post object, which must include an image URL, a title, a content, and some user ID. And when that function then gets called with that data gets stored in the database. So therefore, back in this new post page.js file here, instead of console logging that data, I'll call store post, which is imported from that lib posts folder, and I'll pass such a post object to it. Now, what's important to note here is that, of course, at this point, we don't have any image URL yet. We just have an image file, which is not the same. We'll need to store that somewhere where we then get a link to the stored file. And we'll do that soon, but for the moment, for that image URL, I'll simply insert some fallback URL, or in this case, actually an empty string. Which of course means that for now we won't have an image, but that will change soon. Now for the title, I of course will set that submitted title, and we could either do that like that or use that JavaScript shortcut if the property key name is the same as the name of the variable that holds the data, and do the same for the content, which is also expected. And then we also need to set a user ID. And of course, at this point, we don't have any login mechanism, so we have some dummy users which are created when that database is initialized, but we don't really have a way of becoming any of those users when we use the application. And therefore, for this demo, I'll simply assume that it's always the user with ID 1 that creates a post. And it will then later be the user with ID 2 that can like a post, because that's another feature we'll add later. And of course, later in the course, we'll also add real authentication, but for now, it's just this dummy user ID. That, however, should do the trick. That should store the post. Now with that, if we save that, and I maybe reload this page to make sure that it's really using the latest code, I could enter a title like yummy, then pick another image which I prepared, in this case some loaded fries, and then add some text like had a great stay at the Pitmaster's restaurant, which is a real restaurant, a real great restaurant, and enjoyed a nice burger and some loaded fries. Something like this. Now again, if I click create post, we won't get any feedback here because we still haven't added any logic for this. But if we go to the feed page, we should now see that we can see our post here. Of course, without an image at this point, because again, we're not storing that yet, but all the other data is here. And this is data that's coming from the database. Because in that feed folder in the page.js file, I'm calling the getPosts method as you learned it in the data fetching section with async await. And getPosts is simply a function from that lib posts.js file that reaches out to the database and fetches some data. And therefore, we can tell that we're successfully storing the submitted data in that database, which is another huge step forward. But of course, now it would be nice to also get some feedback when we submit that form. So that, for example, these buttons disappear and we see some loading text whilst we're waiting for the submission, and we're also maybe navigated away once the data has been submitted, so that we maybe automatically navigate to this feed page thereafter. And that's therefore what we'll work on next.